I'm Susan and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to show you what you can do with the cases of your watch. The other video I created was just what you could do with the watch faces and reusing them, and today we're going to use just these cases. Right. Now I'm just going to take this one, which is just a nice silver case, and it's got the little stem in here. I just put it on the side because I thought it was easier to glue that in after I've got it done. Now to create anything in the background, you can use polymer clay, you can use stickers, you can use an old card, anything you have that has a really neat embellishment. You've got about a 1-inch space here, and for me, I just need the bottom piece. The top piece we can put on the side until we put it all together, and I just think of this as a place we can decorate. Now for me, I have all my tiny swatches of clay that I just keep left over. It's just easier to work from. So I'm just going to pick a color palette of what I want to work with in the background here. I'm feeling these pretty blues. I like these blues here. Well, let's go with this turquoisey blue. I'm just going to thin it out with my fingers. Sometimes I just like to feel the clay. And I'm going to take a little bit of liquid Sculpey, and I'm using this as a glue to get our clay to stick inside of here because this is just a metal casing. I don't want it to come apart and move around inside of here. Now there's any way in the world you can put clay in here. You could roll it out on a stamp, you could make little designs, but I just feel like playing with the clay and letting it do what it naturally does. Now see the edge of that case? You can just break the clay off right on the edge there, so you don't need to worry about it. And here I can even stretch it if I want the whole piece in there, and I'll use my handy trusty tool here. Now I didn't want to stamp a design in the background. I just want to see, for some reason, what the clay does, sort of like a painting. Just let it do what it's going to do, rather than, not everybody has stamps, not everybody has all sorts of supplies, so I want to show you things you can do with what you just have around the house. So let's take a little bit of a darker clay and just warm it up in your hands. You don't have to have a big machine and everything to get this all done. You're only using tiny amounts anyway. So now I'm just going to take a knitting needle. You could use a pencil, anything, a ball, tool, whatever you have. I just want to blend the clay down. Now there's no rhyme or reason to what I'm doing. I'm just playing here. But sometimes just playing is the best part. And I want it to look like I have brush strokes in my clay, like I painted this on. So I'm just going to blend this together. Just needs a little something, not much. And I want you to see how I really don't plan this or think about it or stress over it. I just enjoy watching the colors blend together. And as you're blending, you'll get ideas. You'll start to see things in there. You'll decide what colors you want to add or what's talking to you. So you have more tools around you than you probably realize. Even an old pen will work really well to do this. Those dried out old pens work great as tools. Now I have my background all finished. I like the way it's got that textural blend to it. Now if you wanted more colors or you wanted to swirl it, keep going. This was just where I felt like it was blended enough that I would stop. Now I'm just taking a little tiny bit of green. I'm feeling like I want some leaves on here. I feel like it's a nice background for something like that. And I'm just going to make a few little pieces, some larger and smaller. And I'm just going to roll these in my hand like a piece of rice. Always check where the sprue goes. Right there is the side. So this would be the bottom. I always like to add my larger pieces first, just because it's easier to work off of them. And I'm just going to take a lighter color. I want some contrast in here. Now I don't care if my pieces match. I just care that they're smaller pieces and the clay is soft. Because I'm not looking to have everything the same. I'm not looking for symmetry here. Now the beauty of having this in this little tray is that I can just pick it up and blend out things the way I want. So much easier than when you're working on a table. Now you can feather these leaves out if you want a little bit on the edges here. They don't have to just be one pull. You can just give them a little bit of a vein design highlight. And you can see how much definition I got just in that little bit of pulling the clay. And let's throw some other smaller leaves on there. And these I'm just making like a little short grain of rice and doing the same little pull motion and then adding those little veins. Keep checking with your cover on this to make sure that your design isn't too close to the edge that you'll lose it, because you see how far this bezel goes in? You want to make sure that you can see everything. And now to add some flowers. I can always add more leaves. I like the free, and I think I'm going to use this pretty pink. So I've just rolled out a really thin piece of clay. I'm using my little, these are actually cane benders from Tiny Pandora. Now just rolling out some of this pink clay. And I'm just using, this is not a miniature roller, it's just a cane bender from Tiny Pandora. They not only work great for canes, but they work great for the small clay kind of stuff. I love these tiny rollers, actually more than anything for rolling out clay. But any size roller will do the trick. And I like to put my clay on a piece of paper before I cut it. Now I'm using, these are the tiny cutters. They come in a set. You can get them on eBay, AliExpress. I've got them linked under numerous videos. Just search fondant cutters and these always come up. They're like $2 for a set of 4. And this is one of the medium sizes and this is the smallest size. And I'm just going to cut a few flowers. I don't know if I'm going to use 1 or 3 or maybe even different colors, but it won't hurt me to have too many. I can always make beads out of them. And then for the tiny cutter, I'm going to use this peach that I've made a little bit thinner. And I always like to cut 3 whether I use them or not. It's only clay, so if you make too many flowers, just squish it back up in a ball and you'll use it on something next time. Now, as I usually do, I'm going to indent my little flowers just to give them a little bit more definition. And this is just a needle tool. And to decide where that's going to go. Yes, right there. And I think some smaller ones coming out of it. Just a little spray. Now I just like to take my needle tool and make sure I embed that in the clay, because if I put any beads in here or anything that moves around, I don't want it to kick my flowers off of the clay. I want to make sure that they're all one solid piece so that this won't move at some point. Now you could, if you wanted, just keep the flowers loose in here so that they wiggle all around. Just depends what you want to do. I like to have beads, or I like to have loose beads or rhinestones moving around. I want my flowers to stay stationary, but this is really up to you. What's your personal, and I have just a tiny bit of yellow. I just want to make some tiny buds. And now I'm just making teeny weeny little dots. So these will look like little buds. I want this to look like a spray of flowers. And now I'm just going to take my little needle tool and blend it in with the other clay, but I want to spread it so that it looks like it's part of those leaves. Now it's not exact. See that little ball split? Just take your needle tool, push it back together. And there I have a beautiful little palette of flowers. Now I want some rhinestones in the center of my flowers, so I'm just going to take a little bit of liquid clay. Just need enough for it to stick in there. And of course it goes everywhere but the middle, but this dries clear, so no worries. You'll never see this. Now I have some tiny rhinestones. I don't actually know the size of these rhinestones. These would fit on a fingernail, so if you search crystal nail rhinestones, you'll find these tiny ones. They're also known as a chanton. And I'm just using a wax pickup and putting the rhinestones right in the center there. So I'm just going to embed these with my regular pencil. And now you can see how pretty that is. So when we put it in our setting, we have this cute little shadow box. Now I will bake this according to manufacturer's directions and come back and we can finish the piece. Now to create a little rose like this, it looks really complicated, like I spent a lot of time, doesn't it? Let me move it around so you can see the dimension in it. It's actually pretty simple. Now the background was just some pearl clay. This was some teal pearl clay. Here's just some white pearl clay. I just took my knitting needle and created just this little pattern in there because I want to put 3 roses in the center, and I just find that it's easier to lay out a pattern so I know here's where each one goes, and you don't have to lay it out, but sometimes it just helps you in your head. Now to create my little leaves, these I'm using a little bit more clay. I don't want exact amounts, I just want them to be a little bit different on each one. And so I create a teardrop, little ball, flatten it as flat as you can, pinch it at the top and keep flattening it. And there I have a leaf. I'll just create the other ones, same method. Now to create the little veins, I'm just pulling my needle tool through here so that I create the vein in the center of the leaf. And to create those little tiny ones, I'm just dragging them out because roses really have like a little pointy leaf. Our leaves all laid out, and you can see exactly where I'm putting the roses. I've got those circles. Now I've got 3 different colors of pink clay because I wanted 3 different colors of roses. So I'm going to do the first one, which is just a small piece of pink. This is the palest pink, and I'm just going to roll it out. Now I don't need this much. If you wanted a bigger rose, you could use the whole piece, but you'll see what I'm doing in a second. Now I'm just going to take a piece of paper and squish it, just a scrap piece of paper. You can use anything. And then flatten it out and peel it off. Now I'm just going to curl it up so you can see the center of my rose. And now I'm just going to wrinkle it in. I don't know how else to describe this, but I'm folding it a little bit as I bring it in. And if you don't get it totally folded, don't worry about it. Just let it happen. We can fix a lot of this when we go to put it on. And it's a little too bulky on the back. Okay, now I've got my rose formed. So I'm not sure how I'm going to show you this, but I cut the back off. Well, let's see if we go with. So I'm cutting that back piece off right there, this angle. And I know it looks a little distorted yet, but let's get it on and form it before we decide. I think it's salvageable. So it looks a little funny now, but just give me a minute. So I just need to push it in there. Just take your needle tool and just push it in between petals in there. There we go. And unfold it a little where it's, and you can push some of the petals in to make them more defined. And there we have rose number 1. Now it's not the most perfect rose, but wait until you see when I get the other ones on, it'll look a lot better. So I'm just going to take the darker pink and do the exact same thing. So now once again I have my next rose formed. This one is not as deep as the other one, so I'm just going to put this one right on down. And I didn't cut the back off of this one because it's not that much clay here. See, I'm just forming the petals by using my little pin or needle tool. It's technically a pin. And now you see how that other rose that didn't look as much like a rose is looking more like a rose now. Which is the darkest color pink. Now if your clay is too soft, let it sit on this paper for a minute. That'll absorb some of the oil in it and make it a little bit sturdier. You can see I've got a little pink on me from mixing this clay. Once again, just twirl it around and add a few little folds in between there. And like in nature, each one of these will come out different. Now here I used a smaller piece once again, so I can just put this right down. But if you have a bigger piece, I cut the one on this one, so it doesn't seem to matter. I find it works out one way or another, but I want a bigger rose here anyway, so I don't want to cut this down. But it's just a matter of pulling these down and defining the petals. And there you go, you can see my little bouquet of roses. So there you can see how it looks like a really neat little shadow box when I put it on top. Now I put it on top of all of my pieces before I bake them, just in case I need to make them a little bit flatter because this is pretty thick. And I just want you to see that. So it fits underneath my crystal perfectly, but just make sure that it fits okay. And now before I bake this, I've decided I just want to add a few little crystals around my rosettes here. And I just have a little bit of liquid clay on my brush, and I just want to put it in where I'm going to put a rhinestone so that it sits in the liquid clay like a glue. And now you can see just adding a few little rhinestones, what a difference that makes. I just wanted a little bit of sparkle in the background. Now I'm back and I have all my little pieces embellished, and I've glued the little sprues that go for you to change your watch. I just wanted to fill that in. I like the way the case looks better when that's in. And I just use a little E6000. And you would probably think that I have to glue these into the cases, but I actually don't. Because when you go to change the battery, you're pulling this apart anyway. So they're designed to open and close without an issue. Now sometimes the gaskets that go in here are rotted because they're usually rubber. If that's the case, you may have to put a little bit of E6000 in here just to get it to stay where that goes into that. So it kind of shows you how it matches in. Some of them do and some of them don't. They're all different and they just snap right in. See, it snapped in. I don't have to worry about it. And if I did change my mind and want to add some beads or something to this that move around in there, I could easily just pop that out and add them. Here I have some very tiny little Shanton rhinestones, and I'm just going to pour them in between the flowers here because I know that's the easiest spot that they'll stay. And now this is one of the reasons I don't like things that move around is you can see they're stuck in the roses here. So now I have to pop this out, and I may not put the rhinestones in at all because I don't like the way they look hanging out inside the flowers there. So it depends, maybe something like this. I'll move them over to here to see what that looks like. Now we'll try to put the rhinestones in with the flatter one. I think the rhinestones would be fine moving around in here. They get obviously caught up in the roses, but the roses I like just as a little shadow box, just like this. So I'm just going to match up where that little divvy is and pop this back in. And there we have a beautiful little shadow box. And since the other roses, they got stuck, I like just this plain roses the way it is. And you can see how you have a very antique-y look with this little shadow box and the rose. I love the way these look. They have such an interesting vintage look. And I'll just put the rhinestone back in there, and I'll show you how the rhinestones move in this. You can see how when you move this one, the rhinestones give you some movement. It's like a little shaker card. So you can add rhinestones, beads, whatever you have. You can create so many interesting things. So let me get my beads out and we'll get started. Here I have all three of the watch cases that are finished. This one we put the little bit of movable rhinestones in there, and these I just left plain. I like the way they look plain. Now if you wanted, you could incorporate these all together into something. I think if I thought about that sooner, I would have had the roses in this case so that it matched the roses here. And since I don't, I'm going to use them all separately. So let me take those out of the way so I don't distract you, and we're going to use this case. So I have some beads over here that I'm going to use to create the chain with, and I have some tools. I have a wire cutter, a round nose plier, and a flat nose plier. I have some 24 gauge wire. You can use a thicker wire if that's what you have. I like the thinner wire, it's just easier to handle. It's all personal choice. So I'm going to cut off about 10 inches of wire. And it doesn't matter if you work in a 6-inch bunch, 10-inch bunch, whatever size works for you, because we're just going to be using little pieces of our wire as we go. And these are polymer beads that I've made. This is a Clay Zoo design. If you like these beads, he has a tutorial on how to make that cane. And this is just from a bead roller that I rolled these out. It's an old bead roller. I'm not even sure they make this shape anymore. It's a bicone shape. I like these, they're the right color, so they're the ones I'm going to use. But you can find these bead rollers a lot of times used on eBay, so check them out all the time, because a lot of people, when they're tired of doing polymer clay, just sell their bead rollers, or some people just don't like bead rollers. I happen to like doing them with the roller and by hand. It just gives you different effects. What we're going to do with our wire is take your round nose plier, bend it towards you, and bend it away, creating a loop. So you're getting a nice loop around the head of the plier. That's it. Now you're going to take your flat nose plier and grab that little loop and wrap that extra wire around. I've shown this numerous times in videos, but in case you haven't seen those videos, it's a quick refresh. And that creates a perfect little loop. Clip the end, add a bead, and create another loop at the other end. So bend towards yourself and then away from yourself, and that will create your loop again. Grab your pliers and wrap the wire towards and around it. This way it can never come undone. And I like to straighten this out so it's flat on both sides. Just makes a nicer falling chain. Clip the end. The same process over and over again. So now I will make my loop again. Oh, towards myself, away. Sorry about my snoring puppy. I've got my loop. Now I will add this little link into my loop. And I keep doing this till I create a chain. Wrap this around so that it closes it. And you never have to worry about this coming apart because it's wrapped around. Or if you just bend it into a circle, if it gets a little pressure on it, it can easily come apart. This won't come apart because it's wrapped. And now I'm just going to add a polymer bead and close that up. And you can add multiple beads, you don't have to add one. My wire has a little kink in it, and most of you would just cut that off. All you have to do is take your flat nose plier and just give it a little crimp. You'll get that right out. That was the kink from holding it in the roll. I just hate to waste any wire when you could straighten it out so simply. So I'll just continue adding beads to this until I get a chain that's long enough to hold up my watch case. And you can create a pattern however you like of adding beads and changing colors, just the same as you would when you were stringing them. You can see how nice and movable and pliable this is, so it falls really nicely. Now as you get to the end here, I've got a long chain of beads. I want to attach it to my watch. Now the decision is, do I want the flowers to go downward like this or upward? I like them downward like that, just visually works better for me. Pick whatever makes you happy. Now I have my loop at the end here, and I'm just going to hook it on to this watch band holder. Now we all know this watch band clip is nice and tight. You can undo these and push it through, but there's usually a special tool to get these on and off. I just find it easier to hook directly onto these as if it were a bead. Hold that loop with my plier and just wrap that wire around and clip it just as I did with everything else. Now, you will have a problem with this sliding back and forth. The little trick I like to do to keep this in place on each end is, I'm not a wire wrapper, so I'm not really skilled in this, but I just put a piece of wire here and then start wrapping it around this core piece. And that will give a little bar of wire, almost like a spring, and it keeps the beads in position a lot nicer. So you're just wrapping it over and around, and it'll start to pull tighter the more I do it. So you just keep pulling it and squishing it down onto itself. And that seems to hold this and keep it from sliding back and forth. Now you can do this after you get the other side in, but I did find that doing this once I get one side in is just easier. But if you notice, I'm holding that other wire down here. If you're wondering how I'm grabbing this, because that other end I will clip, but if I don't have something to grab it, it won't stay when you pull on it, because I'm putting a lot of pressure when I'm pulling this wire back. I want to clip this so that it doesn't have a little thing that catches on anyone's blouse or shirt or anything. And I want to make sure I clip this one really tight, so lifting it up since it turns just like a spring and getting it nice and tight. Now this does not slide over, it stays right in place. So it's just that those little techniques that are just little tricks that you need to do. I'm going to create this piece for the other side. Now I have my ends finished, and you could add either a clasp like this, a regular lobster claw clasp, and a chain. That's my normal way of doing it. It's a nice way to finish it off. Makes it a little adjustable with the chain on the end, and that works. But if you don't happen to have a lobster claw or a chain, there's a way you can do this with just using a simple piece of wire. And the easiest way to do it is create a large loop on one end. And this will be the loop that acts as our clasp. Right on that end I have a larger loop. And then you're going to just lock this loop up just by taking my flat nose pliers. I can create that nice little flat shape. It's just easier to latch into. Now to create a little hook, I'm going to take, this is about 4 inches of wire. You won't need the whole piece. And I'm just going to go about a 1/2 inch down and bend it onto itself. And now I'm going to go right down to the end here, bend it towards me and away from me, just the same as we create our little circle. As if we're going to put it on to a bead. I'm going to latch it onto this end and add it through the loop that way. So I've got it going through the loop. Now I will take my flat nose pliers and hold on to that loop. Rather than cutting this off after I wrap it, I'm going to continue wrapping it around these 2 wires. And that will give them just more strength. Sorry about my snoring puppy. I'm boring her again. So you can wrap this around 3-4 times. I like to wrap it around 5 or 6 times so that this wire, when I bend it, doesn't pull up, and you'll understand a little bit better in my next move. But it's always good to know how to make a clasp with what you have rather than you have to keep buying things. So now there we go. I've got it wrapped around 7 or 8 times. I just kept going. So you can keep going. And then I'm just going to take this top part and bend. And now you have this beautiful little hook that goes right through your loop and a perfect little clasp. So if you don't have a nice lobster claw clasp or any chain, you can do it this way, nice and simple. And this will hold just perfectly. You can bend it down a little tighter to hold, and that works just the same. So no worries if you don't happen to have all the parts. Now to add my leaf for my fringe here, I start with the bottom of the leaf and work all the way up and then attach it. It's just easier to do that way. And to add the leaf, I'm just putting it right onto my wire and then taking the wire and closing it up on top of the leaf and bring it around Now don't bring it around too tight. You want that leaf to be able to move in there. So you want this bead to swing in it. You want to have some nice movement in it. Now I will take my round pliers and hold it down, and take my flat pliers and wrap it around. Just the same as we did if we had a loop. And now I'll cut that. And because this polymer clay bead doesn't really have any weight to it, I want it to hang. I need to add a bead to this just to get some weight into this piece. I'm going to add one of those little blue beads, and now I'll make my loop just the same as I did for the other pieces, and then wrap it and attach my other little links as I go up. Now to put our little fringe on here, it's the same as we did the other pieces. I'm just going to clip it onto the end of my little watch case here and then just wrap it around. Now I will continue to add these and come back. And I'll just add as many that fit across nicely. Here's the finished necklace that we created together, and you can see how beautiful it comes out with all the little beads and stuff on it. And this one is the one that I added the rhinestones to, so you can see it has a lot of movement when I shake it. So if you like that movement, add the little rhinestones or beads. This one I did just using the chain and some turquoise pieces. I liked the contrast of the rough turquoise and the finished polished crystal with the polymer clay beads. And I just did a little dangle here. Now, the way I did this is just a little swoop of chain and then a little dangle in the center. I just wanted something different. And here I just want you to see how different this looks when it's finished off all in the case. And here's one where I've used 2 watch cases so that you don't have to be stuck with just one. If you have 2 that have a similar design, these are both very similar in their design of the case, the gold matches. So I thought they were kind of fun to put together rather than just one single one. And I left the fringe off of this one just because I liked the way they had a more modern look. How they really have a lot of dimension. Here I did the 3 roses in a case that I put them together with an ombre yellow background. I wanted something more gold and yellow. And I put the little beads in there that move around so you can see they wiggle. The only problem with the roses is the beads get caught on top of the roses. So you have to keep tapping them to get them down or open it up in the back. That is the one nuisance. I'm not sure I'm going to leave the beads in this one just because of that. Now this white one, I did all white for the background because I felt like the case was so special that just keeping it plain in the background would just really set that piece off. And this one, I don't have anything else in it, and I really like the way this looks just being the flowers. And if you're not into having all that fringe, you can just have a single dangle. And this one was just done all in purple crystal and some purple different polymer clay beads. And I did add the little beads in with this one, and it didn't seem to get caught in the flower. It just seems to be certain ones, I think it's too close to the case. But you can see it adds a lot of movement. Now this case had a funny top on it. The band had a bar that went across this little space in here, and I didn't like the way it looked blank, so I just took some E6000 and glued some seed beads in there so it had just a more interesting look. The other end you can see is just kind of plain, and I thought that's fine because you're not going to really see that, but if somebody's looking down at this, I like the way this looked better filled in. Now here I used one of the cases in bead embroidery, and I did it in to show you that you don't have to just use wire. You can use bead embroidery with pretty much anything. And I just wanted to show you closer up all the little details and how that case just looks like a little cameo set in there. Definitely a mixed media feel. And I love the way this one came out with all the colors, and I love the eclectic feel that this one has. So think about it, you can incorporate these into any type of beadwork that you love to do. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I gave you lots of ideas and inspiration, and thanks for watching.